part of your 3D project, you're going to be working with clay, and I'm going to demonstrate a few different techniques. You're going to be working with slabs of clay to create a 3D object. So you'll get a slab of clay and it will be flat, and we want to make it look 3D. So I'm just going to show you a few different things. So I'm going to start with joining pieces together. So as with the paper and the cardboard, use something, got a sharp knife and something with a straight edge to cut with. So you just cut through. To make this more 3D, I'm going to stand this up like that. Now, you can't just join it on like that and it's going to stay like that because it will just fall off. So what we need to do is score everything and slip it. So slip is liquid clay. It's a bit like lots of paint, lots of clay mushed up with water to make like a paint, and it's like it acts like a glue. So what you have to do is score both ways, like cross hatching, on the bits that you need to join together on both of them. And then you put plenty of slip on. And you can join the two together like that. And if you give it a bit of pressure but not too much, and join it together like that. You can also get a little bit more clay, roll it with the flat of your hand and put that bit in there, and that will help join it, and you can blend it in with your fingers or with a knife. Smooth it on. So that's joined together now, and then of course you can add more bits to it and build up your 3D object. So that's one way of joining some bits together. Another thing that we can do is work on a bigger piece. So you can use different moulds to give you a shape. So in this case I've got this wooden tube. Wrap it in newspaper so that the clay doesn't stick to it. And if you measure roughly what kind of size you want it to be, cut it out. And you wrap that around the wooden mould. And where it comes together, if you cut it, make sure you leave enough to join it together. And if you stand it up, you can press that in. Again, you need to score it. And on both pieces, put plenty of slip on. And join the two together. And you can press that in, you can leave that edge like that, which could become part of your design. So you have that edge like that, or you can blend it in if you like. So that could be a starting point then to add other shapes to it. So you could perhaps add lots of circles on, rolling bits of clay in your hand to make different shapes and adding them on. But again, even though that seems like it's going to stick there, you still have to score it and slip it. So you can make up a pattern by fitting lots of these on, if you think about some of the patterns that you've seen in your photographs. And then you can add a bit of texture if you like, so press things into, it's just a plastic brick, and press it in and you've built up a bit of texture and a pattern there as well. There's all sorts of different things we can use to roll into the clay to create texture. So you start to build things up. The other thing we can use is different moulds to create shapes. So this is like a mould made from a ball of some sorts. So you can press the clay into this, you can build up lots of texture pieces. Just press them in to the mould. You can use strips. You can use coils as well, so if you get a piece of clay and roll it between your hands and then roll it on the surface that you're working on. Use the flat bit of your hand here. You could perhaps then coil that up. So that could be added to the outside of your sculpture that you've made, or it can go into a mould and be pressed in, and when it comes out you'll have all different textures on the outside. So you can just keep building that up, and when it's dried enough you can bring that out of the mould, and you could perhaps use that circular bit and then add more to it, or add it onto something that you've already made. I'm going to show you a few examples of what other pupils have made and techniques that they've used. So if we look at what I was doing here earlier, this has been made in the same way, but it's had a base put on the bottom, and then whoever's made it has added lots of bits on, and they've added different textures using things that they've rolled into the clay, or they've cut into the clay with a knife, or pressed different things in, like that could be the end of a pen or something like that. And then they've added all these other little bits on that they've chopped lots of little bits and created a pattern and texture. Quite interesting. And then they've got like bigger bits that stick out as well. Okay, and then obviously they've painted it afterwards with glaze. Here's another example. This one's been made started in the same way around the tube, and then they've added on coils of clay that they've scored and slipped and added onto, and then they've added on extra little bits that they've cut out, and then the spirals that I was showing you before they've added on there, which creates a really interesting effect. And just lots of different shapes, textures and patterns. And then another one, this one's been made by cutting out lots of shapes from a flat piece of clay and then scoring them, slipping them, standing them up. They probably had to use some things just to support them while they were drying a little bit. That was quite an interesting one. And again, lots of different textures made with a knife probably there. Okay, here are a couple more examples that have used the mould that I showed you before, the circular mould. So that's been made in a similar way, in a mould, lots of different pieces joined together, different textures, and then when it's come out of the mould, a base has been put on, again with lots of textures on it, so you can see the textures that are on the outside and on the inside. It's quite interesting. And then this is another one, so this bit here will have been made using the circular mould, and then they've added a base onto it, and then this coil, and then they've used slabs of clay, cut out lots of triangles of the same size and joined them all together to create an interesting pattern going up the side of the sculpture. Okay, I'm just going to show you a few examples of different things that people have made with cardboard, so in previous classes. So this is somebody's work, and they've cut out different pieces of cardboard, stacked them up to create texture and shape. And again, lots of strips stacked on top of each other, cutting out so that you can see through the cardboard. And here they've turned the cardboard on its side so you can see the corrugated sections, and they've PVA'd it onto the background, which creates an interesting texture. And this one again, cut the corrugated bit, and these have been cut out with a hole punch and glued on to create texture. And then again, strips kind of woven together. Here's some examples of a 3D object that somebody's made. So again, they've built up lots of different shapes to create a figure. So this is the object they've chosen as their inspiration, and stacked all the bits of cardboard up. They looked at the shape of the figure and used the shapes of the cardboard to create their own sculpture. And here are just some examples that artists have made. So this is looking at the different textures in the cardboard. So you've got the corrugated section and then the smooth bent around each other to create interesting shapes. This is another one that's where the artist has used circles and stacked them up together, used the corrugated bits again to create texture. This one's just cardboard circles all stacked together. Creates quite an interesting effect. They must have perhaps used something else here to create the coloured sections. This one is they've cut strips and bent them into different shapes to create an interesting sculpture. That one, lots of different cardboard circles linked together. And that one is different sections joined together, perhaps stapled together to create a 3D object. Moving on to paper. This is somebody's example. They've taken photographs of the paper that they've cut. So there's the curl that we were talking about before. Some interesting images, and the folding, cutting and folding, cutting out letters, folding them up. And here's some more photographs. All quite interesting shapes. It's the kind of thing that we're going to be doing. Here's some examples that some artists have done, very clever, cutting out that makes a figure or a building. This one is a tree that's been cut out and folded and made into a skeleton. This is slightly more simple shapes folded together to create a pattern, or glued together or joined together with staples. And here's some actual examples of some paperwork that some students have done. So different bits cut with the Stanley knife and pulled up to create 3D shape. And lots of bits folded together to create a concertina. And lots of little cuts, but lots of them together create quite an interesting pattern.